Hey everyone, today I'm making a really simple, lovely, everyday style kind of flatbread recipe. This is an unleavened bread. You can add some sourdough starter to this if you want, and it works quite well that way as well. But I wanted to just keep this very, very simple. There's no fat or milk or yogurt or oil or anything in this recipe. It's just flour, water and salt. It's really simple, but it's lovely. I do use a little bit of refined all-purpose flour in this because it does help them to puff up a lot, but most of the flour in it is whole grain flour. I use whole oat flour that I blend from rolled oats in my blender. I don't mock mill oat flour. I don't put it through my stone mill because oats are a bit fatty and it does tend to clump up in the mill a little bit, so I just do it in the blender. And spelt flour. So this is 100% whole grain spelt flour. I just happened to have this pre-milled the other day. Normally I don't pre-mill any of my flours, but I've been using this for other things and testing recipes. But this is the grain that one's come from. So I just mill most of nearly all of my flours fresh in my mock mill when possible. This recipe is as easy as it gets, and this is the only way so far that I've been able to make a flatbread that pretty much anyone can do that puffs up every time. Like, this is the only recipe that just does that for me. I've tried quite a few 100% whole grain flour recipes, and I have yet to find one that is as easy to let puff up like this one does. So that's a bit of a shame. I'm not going to give up on that. But at the moment, I just wanted to share this because I know that some of you are really keen to see this recipe. So it's very simple. It's 100 grams of each of the flours. So that's 100 grams of the whole spelt. And then I take 100 grams of the oat flour. I think actually the oat flour is it's a really great ingredient in this recipe. Oats just the starches just gelatinize really beautifully, and I think that's what helps to make these flatbreads puff up without oil and stuff. And just finally 100 grams to bring it up to 300 of plain flour. This is just all-purpose flour. This is not my ideal. I'd love to have this 100% whole grain, but this is where I'm at the moment. As soon as I figure out a whole grain version that puffs every time with ease, I will be the first to let you know. There we go, 300 grams. And to that I add 5 grams of salt, which is about a teaspoon. You can add a lot less salt if you want. I do like a good pinch of salt in my, that was more than a pinch, maybe half a teaspoon. You can tell I don't worry too much about these things. I don't eat many processed foods, so I tend to have the salt that I eat in my diet just comes from what I add in, so I'm fairly aware of how much I'm getting. Just mix the salt through, mix the 3 flours through, and then I add to that 200 grams of water. This is just filtered tap water. There we go, 200. And that's it. That's the recipe. Flour, salt and water. I love this so much. I love that this works without putting heaps of oil in it. Lots of flatbread recipes have a lot of oil from what I've seen, and I'm just not a fan of that. I try and keep my diet pretty lean. So just mix that together roughly. You want it to be a pretty soft dough. You don't have to knead it or anything. I'm just kneading it to make sure it's mixed properly. Oh, it's such a lovely soft dough. It's going to be sticky. You want it to be pretty soft. And then once that dough is mixed, I tend to just let it rest for half an hour or so, just to help all the fibre in the flour and the bran to absorb the water and for the texture to become a lot smoother. So we'll just come back in half an hour. And just cover your dough with something fairly solid or a damp cloth to stop it from drying out. After the dough has rested for half an hour or so, it should be a little bit firmer and generally a bit more of a smoother texture. What I do then is just give the dough a brief little knead, if you like. None of this is really super necessary. It just has a lovely texture. It's hard to resist kneading this dough. And then what I do is I just start to divide the dough. I just take off sections that are around about golf ball sized and put them into a ball shape and put them back into your bowl. You can do it this way if you don't want to tear the dough. That does keep it a little bit better. You can weigh these out if you want to be really precise, but I just eyeball it. I think that's about a golf ball size. So how many did I get? 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I got 10 little balls, but you can make these breads whatever size you like. I like this size, but you can make them as small or as large as you like, really, as long as they fit on your pan. The beauty of this recipe and keeping it really simple without any sourdough is that you can put this in the fridge now, and even before you put it into balls, just leave it in the dough and put it in the fridge, and it will store for, you know, I've stored this for up to a week and used the dough to bake flatbreads with. The longer it does sit, the more you will get some level of spontaneous fermentation, which is great. It will over ferment and get really sour if you put sourdough starter in it and leave it in the fridge for too long, but you don't have to make these straight away. I am going to make these today though. What you need for this is a pan of some sort. A cast iron would be great. This is a high quality Tefal French made non-stick crepe pan, which I love. I mostly use it for flatbreads, but it's a good quality one. Make sure if you get using non-stick, get a good quality one. You need a bowl of flour just to dust the little balls in. This is I think it's mango wood, my little Indian chapati rolling pin that I love. And this is the big trick of this whole video. This is the best tip. You really, really, really need to cover your dough, have somewhere to put your little flatbreads in once they're done. And this is the secret to not getting hard, dry, yucky flatbread. We'll talk a bit more about that once we get to that point. But you need something like that with a lid to cover them and a cloth. So I heat up my pan to a medium to high heat and take out your first little dough ball. I just like to give them a little rounding on the bench. And then what you do is I just pop them in a little bit of plain flour. I find plain flour is the best because you don't actually want the bran in this situation. You want it to be nice and smooth so it doesn't do any damage to the bread with chunks in it. And then just keeping a nice fine layer of flour on the outside, just spin it around and roll it out. You don't want it to stick on the bench, but you don't want too much flour either. I hope my fans in India aren't cringing watching me do this. I've travelled to India and I've seen many Indian and Sri Lankan men, people from all sorts of places make these just with such expertise. I only hope to be able to do it as good as they do one day, but that's good enough for me, given that I didn't grow up making these. I have made a lot of them though, so I tend to be a bit fussy over my first one, and then once I get into the swing of it, I'm all right. So you want a fairly thin flatbread, not too thick. I'd say that's about 2 to 3 millimeters thick. If it looks a bit too thick on some of the edges, just thin it out a little bit more. You don't want it so thin that it's going to break. You really want to maintain the integrity of the bread, otherwise it might not puff so well. So once you've got it to the thinness that you're happy with, pop it in the pan. What I do to get the right technique for this is on the first side, I just leave it there until I see small bubbles appearing. Here we go, starting to puff a little bit. So once you see it starting to puff, turn it over. Then once you see it starting to puff in a bit more of a bigger way on the second side, we'll turn it over again. I'll just wait for that. You don't want to play around with this too much. Don't prod it and press it and poke it. Just leave it. And once it's getting a bit puffy like that, flip it over again. And you should start to see it puff up really well. Once you start getting a big bubble like that, then you can put a little bit of pressure on it and the whole thing will puff up. Look at that. This recipe is so good that even the very first one puffed. How good is that? That's my kind of recipe. So I love them to puff like that because when they're puffed like that, I know they're filled with steam. I know the bread is completely cooked inside and out. Plus, having a layer in the bread helps keep it a bit lighter because this is an unleavened bread. There's no yeast, there's no sourdough, there's nothing in that to keep it light. So we're keeping it light by puffing it through the cooking process. Now here's the trick to keeping your soft breads really flat. Put them in your container with a lid straight away. Cover them with a tea towel so that no steam, later on this will get full of steam. You don't want any steam falling straight on your breads, they'll go soggy, so you do need the towel in there. And put the lid on and just keep that lid on. Whenever you finish one, put it in there, put the lid back on. And I'll show you later, these breads, they're not dry. They're very soft, they're flexible, they're so good. All right, I'll stop talking now and I'll just make the rest of these. Well, that's it. The flatbreads are all made. You can see all the steam collecting inside the lid here. That steam, wrapping these up like this and keeping a solid lid on them, that helps trap the moisture in the dough. If you left these flatbreads just out straight away, I mean, it's fine if you want to eat them straight away, but they will very quickly dry out and become crunchy and dry and pretty horrible. This is how you keep them nice and moist and very flexible so that you can store them for a while. You don't have to eat them all at once. I even put these in the fridge in summer and they just stay in the fridge. You can pop them in the toaster to refresh them. I use them for sandwiches. They're really, really handy. They just turned out absolutely superbly. You can see they're still very, whoa, the steam's coming off them. You can see how flexible they are. And I want to tell you, every single one of these puffed. Every single one. I think I recorded all but one of them. There's 10 here, but every single one of them puffed up. And I think it's the oats and the way that when oats cook, they make a much more sort of starchy jelly consistency. and that's what helps them to puff up so well. There they are. I hope you enjoyed that and found it helpful. Let me know in the comments if you've got anything you want to say about that. Yeah, I'm really happy with these. Glad to finally share the recipe with you all. See you next time.